I should have gotten some funky 1950s sci-fi music for today's episode, and I don't want anybody to misconstrue the image. I specifically selected, Shepard, a somewhat comedic image that would be reminiscent of 1950s sci-fi, because when you came on the show 2 weeks ago, and welcome back incidentally, how you feeling today, Shepard?
Oh, I'm feeling great. It's a pleasure to be back on the show, Jason.
It's good to have you on. And, I want to remind everybody that they can find out everything that they need to know about Shepard and his news organization by going to intellihub.com. But Crowdsource the Truth viewers were outright stunned 2 weeks ago, Shepard, when you came on and you started telling us about the return of Planet X. I gotta be honest, I thought it was ridiculous. How could a planet return? Where is a planet going? How does a planet even move? And Planet X, it just sounds ludicrous. However, I was reading an extremely informative article on intellihub.com just yesterday, and this is an article that Shepard has there. It's talking about a doomsday plan that's been activated. Well, actually, the previous one, the one that I saw, which is the one, Shepard, that was explaining, let me summarize it, because here's how it really sunk in for me. You hear Planet X, it sounds like a silly movie. But you explain in your article that in 1845, when astronomers discovered Neptune, there was limited power of telescopes, etc. The following year, they discovered Pluto, because Pluto's orbit brought it closer to Earth within the range of the existing technology. And at the time, Pluto was classified as a planet, the ninth planet in our solar system. So it wasn't Shepard Ambellas, it wasn't Roger Corman, it wasn't some wacky Hollywood director like Ed Wood. It was astronomers who named this 10th planet, presumptive 10th planet, Planet X, with the X being the Roman numeral for 10, and NASA scientists and astronomers all over the world have observed phenomenon that have caused them to speculate about the existence of this Planet X, which now, through its own orbit, may be returning to close proximity to Earth. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Now, of course, it's pretty hard to get these dates right. I interviewed top Planet X researchers, PhDs on the subject, and they all had their own theories. But if you think about it, I mean, things like this are cyclical and they're documented through history, but to get the exact year and arrival date right, you wouldn't be able to do that unless you were a very powerful government with a very good infrared telescope. And that's exactly what the US government started to do. They put up an infrared telescope back in 1982, 1983, the IRAS telescope, Jason. And they started searching for this because they knew how this trans-Neptune object was tugging on other planets. They were also looking for transits of planets in front of stars. So a transit is when a planet passes in front of a star, so astronomers can briefly see something passing in front of a star and get a direction on it, something like that. There's also something called a dark asteroid. There's also Planet X. Really, some people say it's a failed brown dwarf star, but more than likely that's the failed sun that Planet X orbits around. It's its own independent system, and it has several other planets and a moon to its system, about 5 objects. A failed brown dwarf star is nothing out of the realm. Every solar system, this is openly admitted information, has a binary star component. They have a nemesis, if you will, and that's openly admitted. Our solar system should be no different. Astronomers and scientists say this. So a brown dwarf star basically soaks up all sunlight, and it basically cannot be seen unless it's seen in the infrared spectrum. That's why this was so hard to identify, and why astronomers could only see it tugging on other objects and pushing and pulling things out of the loop in our solar system. As a planet like this, that's speculated to be at least 5 times the size of Jupiter, and I've heard certain researchers say all the way up to 400 times the
Wow.
size of Jupiter. So it's semi, but a lot of them agree it's about 5 times the size of Jupiter, which coincidentally is what they're telling us about this comet Atlas. And when I think about that, I start to think, well, what are they really doing here? If Comet Atlas, it's supposed to be 700,000 miles away, something like that, or less now. If Comet Atlas is really 5 times the size of Jupiter, this gaseous cloud, we should be able to see that essentially bigger than the sun right now, or as big as the sun, or nearly, excuse me, as big as the sun. So that's not adding up to me right now. And I feel like they may have put an object like Atlas, which could be the blue Kachina in this comet coming around, which signifies Planet X's return. But I also feel like they're going to tell astronomers about Atlas, and all astronomers will be pointing their telescopes there. Meanwhile, they've shut down telescopes and observatories
Yeah,
worldwide.
that's weird, isn't
So
it? They're saying it's COVID-19 that's shut these down, that the scientists, I guess, don't want to get sick. But aren't these things, I mean, when we see them in movies, there's just a few scientists in there. Is it really such a problem to maybe get them to wear protective equipment? Why would they shut these down?
right. A lot of observatories are even operated remotely. So
Right.
they left one open in Hawaii. It's the one that tracks near Earth objects, which coincidentally, my friend in Hawaii, I used to live in Hawaii, told me when I started telling him about Planet X in like 2013. He said, "Oh, brah, I know someone who works up there at Haleakala." They literally
Right.
worked at this place, and he said they discovered it and they know it's coming. And this is, you know, he's getting this from one of his friends in Hawaii, hearsay like that. And he didn't know anything about this planet to begin with, but he said his friend told him basically that they had discovered a planet. So that was interesting to me. So Dr. Jason Rand, I've interviewed, he wrote a book called Return to Planet X, and he speculated it would come around about in 2012-ish or something like that, I believe, is what his book talked about. But he said he could be wrong by like 50 or 80 years, I think is what it said in the book, which, I mean, to me, that's nothing. I mean, if you even pinpointed this thing to 100-year period, that'd be
Yeah.
excellent, right?
Now, Shepard, why does it say wormwood right on here? Is that somebody's name? That word's been coming up a
No,
lot lately.
yeah. So wormwood is, I'm not an expert on the wormwood part, but basically, wormwood comes out of the Bible, and it was a comet or a passing of a planet. They also call planet Nibiru. If you look at the ancient Anon, the ancient Sumerian texts that talk about the Anunnaki who inhabited Planet X, which is technically called Nibiru. Um, Basically, this object in the Bible, this celestial object, could be wormwood. Wormwood, when it passed, turned the waters red. It caused a lot of problems, and much like scientific data. There's scientific white papers I've seen that say, hey, when comets pass, it's a known thing. They bring disease, they bring famine, and even cannibalism, typically. So, which is I thought was very weird. Weird. This is in scientific papers. So, wormwood in the Bible. If anyone wants to go check it out, and the references to that, basically Dr. Jason Rand is saying that's some type of reference to it. And he had to go to Russia to study this because they wouldn't let him study this in America. Basically, they basically
Amazing.
ousted him. Yeah, so he went to Russia and he studied all this and put a bunch together. There's his opinion varies a little bit from Zachariah Sitchin, who's another researcher. And I don't know if Rand believes that Planet X is its own system and there's independent planets. I'm going to have to ask him about that. I'm supposed to talk to him here in a couple days on air. But
Hmm.
basically,
Just one thing I want
the,
to add, because someone's put this into our comments as well. Absinthe, rather, I would say wormwood, is the intoxicating ingredient in absinthe. And I was aware of that because a personal friend of mine actually created and brought the brand of Lucid Absinthe to the United States. This was the first authentic absinthe brand available for sale in the United States for 95 years. And wormwood is that anise-derived herb that gives it its properties.
Excellent. I didn't even know that. That's pretty cool. So there's, people's opinions vary on was there Anunnaki there, was there not. The thing is, it's documented in history. So if you look at in where Iraq is now, that was ancient Sumer. It's the oldest known civilization on planet Earth that our archaeologists know of. And in their cylinder seals and their texts, which have been transcribed, basically, they got a king's list that goes back 550,000 years and lists every one of their kings and whatnot.
Where
now you hear stories. So you would have to go research. What you want to research is Anunnaki cylinder seals, and you can look at images of them. Okay. And the audience can research this a lot more.
There we go.
Essentially, what it is, and so you got the Bible, and you got the Garden of Eden, right, and all this stuff, the Book of Genesis. Okay, in all these cultures across the world, you basically have the same story of creation. So the Anunnaki, basically, their story is they basically came here and they seeded the planet, but it was the same story of creation that's in the Bible, okay? So this is all, has all the planets in it, back when there wasn't even astronomers and all the planets were documented. They had major technology, knowledge of a lot of stuff. The Anunnaki were more like giants. You hear about these giants in the Bible, the Nephilim, the Sephilim. A lot of this stuff probably could be run parallel. So these stories you hear in the Bible may be the same type of stuff that's coming from the planet Nibiru. And so what happens is, as the story goes, basically is when this planet, it's in a highly elliptical orbit, and it comes real tight to our sun at one point, and then it wraps around and it comes back real tight to the sun, and it goes behind the sun for years, right? For like 3,000 years or whatever. It's in a 3,600 year orbit. So sometimes it comes in and it wreaks havoc. We got the Noah's flood in the Bible, okay? We've got the extinction of the dinosaurs. We've got parallel civilizations in Egypt. So if people check into this, Atlantis, archaeologists know there was like every 3,600 years it flourishes in Egypt and then kind of dies down, dies down. That's because there's interaction allegedly with the Anunnaki. So the U.S. government has been very interested in this ever since they launched the IRAS satellite, and they also went into Iraq during the Gulf War. And the actual incursion was called Operation Planet X, and they raided a village and some other stuff, but they also went into the Baghdad Museum. They went around and they grabbed all this stuff. They've also raided Zecharia Sitchin's personal residence before he passed away. And, it leads me to believe they were going around collecting, much like Hitler was going around the world trying to obtain this type of information. So are other various governments, and especially ours, once they caught on with the satellite and knew this was real for sure.
So wait a minute. So what is this Operation Planet X? Because we've got it here on Wikipedia. They're saying during Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Planet X was a U.S. Army mechanized raid conducted on a village near Adwar and Al-Dur, 11 miles north of Tikrit, on the night of May 15th, 2003. That's actually very soon after the start of Operation Iraqi Freedom. I think it started in March of 2003, didn't it? Or maybe 2002?
That's right.
Huh.
So they had there's lots of underground tunnels. There's tunnels that go throughout Iraq and Egypt that are hundreds of miles long, believe it or not. They're also very big. Okay, so there's also structures that people made in tunnels where it appears they were hiding from elements on the surface. Okay, so whether that was okay, so when this planet comes around, it's a perturber. It's a perturber for the whole universe. It's also gravity works. Okay, so gravity is basically based on waves. There's gravitational waves. Gravity doesn't operate where people talk about how gravity is attracted to mass. Basically, the modern gravity is a theory. They don't even know what it is. But I'll tell you this: essentially, these flat earthers are right when they talk about this. They say
What?
gravity is a theory. Yeah, so you're going
Well,
to click
that's
out on
right.
this. So these yeah, so so they basically say gravity is a theory. That's like the one thing they may have right. Now,
I
this is
agree with you. I
interesting.
don't get on board
So,
with the flat Earth
right.
stuff.
So now, what's interesting, Bob Lazar, you guys know Bob Lazar. He
I don't know who he
discovered,
is.
or, he came out of Area 51. He's the guy that broke the UFO footage back in the day. He's that
Oh,
scientist that is real popular for exposing Area 51 because he worked at it. And a lot of people thought he was a kook. But see, it turns out everything he talked about was real. So there's an element that he knew about before the element even existed called unobtainium. I think it's like element
unobtainium?
unobtainium or
It's funny, they talk about that in
unobtainium.
the movie Avatar, and I thought it was made up for the movie, but then I found out that it was actually real.
Yeah, so he knew about this before it existed in the public realm. And so I know a lot about Bob Lazar. I've interacted with him on email and stuff. So I might even try to get him on the show. But basically, the thing is he talked about how gravity is. So you see these flat earthers and they're holding like a golf ball and they're like, why doesn't water stick to it if it's attracted to a mass? Or scientists say, well, because of mass, we're stuck to the planet. But he claims it's gravitational waves which cause gravity. And he knows this because he's reverse engineered alien technology that they had at Area 51. And the way the spaceships work, according to Bob Lazar, is they don't propel themselves. Those type of spacecraft that he worked on basically create a negative, they basically have a force field to where it creates like almost like uh,
Counteract the
uh,
gravity.
yeah, they kind of slip into like a hollow pocket that they create, and they tilt toward that because they're distorting gravitational waves,
Wow.
essentially. So imagine if you could somehow make a downhill gravitational pocket in front of you, and your ship just kind of keeps falling into it forward, something like that. I don't know how to explain it. I'm not as
Hmm.
smart as him, but basically that's how these ships travel. So he talked about gravitational waves, which I believe are, planets affect gravitational waves. Our magnetosphere right now is acting up very heavily. We're seeing birds drop dead all over the planet. They navigate based on basically geomagnetics and stuff
I
like
thought
that. So,
5G is killing birds.
well, it could be, and we can't rule that out, but some of this plays into to a change in gravitational waves. Now, researchers, not only researchers, but it's literally documented in history throughout various cultures across the world, basically the same type of documentation that when these objects come around, the blue Kachina, the red destroyer, or this, or a comet, and then followed by the brown dwarf star, wormwood, whatever it is, however they describe it, there's a lot of distortion that happens in the universe at that time. For instance, as these planets move closer, it's going to push asteroids from the asteroid belt, okay? And it's going to disturb all that. Those can all bombard Earth. It can send planets around. It's known to have locked planets into a stop motion for about 3 days. You've heard the Earth stood still. There was a couple days of darkness. This kind of stuff. So when this planet comes around, it's so big. Imagine Jupiter coming pretty close to us. It's going to put us in rotational lock, much like the
Wow.
moon,
Sounds
and
like
it
that
can
would
even
destroy
stop.
a lot of things.
Well, it can even stop the core of the Earth, and there's a
Well, the
lot of
core of
stuff
the
that goes.
Earth spinning, correct me if I'm wrong, the theory goes that the Earth is filled with molten iron, and the spinning of the iron is what generates the electromagnetic field around the Earth that protects us from solar storms and solar radiation. So stopping that would seem to probably dramatically disrupt life on Earth.
Right, and also it could cause a pole shift and all this kind of stuff. And all of this is all basically natural cycles. So they're talking about global warming. Okay, so um, believe it or not, so the sun's not hot. You could probably stand on the surface of the sun. I don't
How
know,
could that
but I'll
be?
tell you this. Listen, it's simple. Okay, now I'll tell you right now, your audience mind is going to be blown. The sun, and I've confirmed this with top level minds in the world, the sun is a magnetic sphere. Okay, now hear me out. When you go into space, it should get hotter. You should burn up the closer you get to the sun. But when you get into space, it's freezing cold. Why? The sun is a magnetic sphere. You only feel warmth from this when it interacts with an atmosphere. When the photons from the sun interact with atmospheric conditions based on the density of various atmospheres on whatever planet they're on, it causes friction and heat. If you're in space, it's freezing cold.
I thought it's
It's a known
constantly
fact.
exploding hydrogen on the sun. But
So,
isn't it because
so
the
they
distance,
say.
but hang on, isn't it, Shepard, possible that the distance from the surface of the Earth to however far humans have traveled into space
Sure,
is
yeah,
it
like it could be hot.
inconsequentially closer
Right,
to the
like so
sun?
it could be hot at the sun. I mean, I'm just saying, you go up in space, it's freezing cold. It should be hotter, you're closer, right? So
I
this
don't know if that theory is correct because if
think
there's
about it.
no
There's
because we're in a greenhouse here on the Earth. So if you've got sunlight coming in that can't go out, that's different than if you're in a big open room with no windows that is outer space where the sun's
so
energy
so
going
you
everywhere.
so it's literally freezing in space. So just think about that. Now I have talked to top minds about this and they said I was exactly right. You could probably go research this, you'll find out the sun's a magnetic sphere. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying it's a very weird observation. So when this planet starts moving in, we also see disruption with different uh, planets, and it's perturbing things in a certain way. What typically happens, according to history, is it starts sea levels rising. Okay, they were telling us global warming and this, right? This thing can push and pull on our oceans, much like they think the moon does. Um, now, I already said it can push asteroids in. Coincidentally, we know that the White House went and they formed a working group, and they've also talked internationally with countries around the world. And this all started in 2018 in June, or yeah, 2018 of June. Okay,
Now,
so
let's
this
let
is
people
fairly
absorb
recent.
this for a second, Shepard, because we've got a lot of people watching right now. And I've invited you on because I think you've brought forward some very important information. Some people are here saying, oh, this is nonsense. But Shepard is reporting on information that is on whitehouse.gov and nasa.gov. So if it's nonsense coming from there, and it's worth us talking about and exploring at very least. This is a document
Okay,
from June
yeah.
2018. Tell us what this is all about.
Well, and just people should know you can't always go to numbers. Like I don't even like going to this COVID map for numbers. It's like, okay, well, I already proved the COVID map wrong because when the COVID map says there was so many deaths in Washington State, like they said there was like 8 deaths in Washington State, I already had paperwork from Washington State in an article, I've proven this, where there was 29 dead. So why are we believing all of these official stories? So that's what, when I tell you things like the sun's not hot or it's a magnetic sphere, it's it's from a lot of data points and a lot of deep research. Now, we can't always trust everything, and no one's saying I'm right, but it's amazingly, you don't get burned up when you go up into space, you actually freeze, okay?
Hmm.
So now this article, this near Earth mitigation plan that the White House has on their website. They just came up with this recently because they knew something was going on. Yeah, they might have a couple people saying, okay, we need to look at these asteroids because there was a couple near misses and we need to identify them all. And they're identifying these things at the rate of 2,000 new objects per year that are near Earth.
Wow.
Yeah, so and a lot of them, they're like John Colin was saying, they just catch them, a couple months out and whatnot. Okay, so they have mitigation plans for this. They have what's called Project DART, which they act like they just now activated and they're not going to publicly test it for another year or year and a half. But that's all basically mumbo jumbo public stuff because they've had space-based weapons platforms forever. They've had literally directed energy weapons that can operate from space-based platforms that can literally, I heard, can literally just wipe out a whole city if they want to.
Well, we've
They
heard a
have,
lot of people point to evidence that indicates that this type of stuff may have been responsible for the fires in Paradise,
yeah,
California, and elsewhere. So
right.
that's not new.
Yeah, and so there's also a platform called Rods from God.
Hmm.
This platform, Rods from God, basically shoots, it's a gravity well weapon. And is what it does is it uses the Earth's gravity well. So they release a 20-foot tungsten core rod and it hits with major kinetic force at, with many times the force of a nuclear weapon. They can bust right down into a bunker. They could just hit anyone they want in the world right there, boom, if they want. But they can also use this to come right in directly behind asteroids. Now, NASA has several ways that it talks about how it can mitigate these asteroids. So typically, when they talk about this, they talk about a kinetic impactor where they can take a rocket or whatever they want and they can fire it into an asteroid at just enough to impact it to change its velocity. Okay. They can even use techniques where once they impact it, they try to throw it back with some thrust, which can even change its velocity even more. Okay. Um, but basically, there's another plan. It's called nuclear deflection. Now, if they have a lot of warning years in advance and they don't think the kinetic method will work, they can try nuclear deflection. So, nuclear deflection would be like, they basically send a nuke out and they hope to blow it up in its path and kind of deflect it from its path, shooting it in another path, and it may or may not break apart a little bit. They mostly try to keep it intact using nuclear deflection. This is all NASA's plans. It's not me saying this. Now, in the case of an asteroid like this incoming one, 1998 OR2, where their variable data shows a trough that this thing's in. So it literally shows an impact as possible. If you go, no one can tell me right now that NASA's website says this thing's going to miss. So like you see all these articles and they say it's going to be a close pass. They can't, anyone that says that is uneducated because there's variable data which shows instead of an asteroid taking a perfect course, it can travel with up and down and sideways within like a tube. Imagine like a tube that's like tens of thousands of miles wide or 1,000-mile wide tube, and that asteroid can kind of bounce around in this tube any way it wants. This is the reason they have variable data like that is because if they just noticed the object recently, they haven't observed many passes of the object, so they can't predict how it's going to go. Even the asteroid that just safely passed us today can literally hit us for the next week and a half. We're
Wow.
right on the edge of that trough, that variable data. Okay,
Yeah,
so
people
now,
need to look at these dates, Shepard. This is all stuff, this week, the other day, today, next week.
right, right. So now, if okay, so it for 1998 OR2, let's just take that as an example, and let's say this object really is a threat, and maybe their variable data that they're showing the public that shows that it could miss or could hit is just on JPL publicly. What if they've calculated it and they know it's going to be a direct hit? Okay, then they've activated this near Earth object mitigation plan through the Stafford Act. 3 weeks ago. Okay. Now, the only way to mitigate an object that you see 3 months out, Jason, are you ready for this? There's two ways to mitigate it. There's only two
Mhm.
ways. We talked about nuclear deflection and kinetic impactor. Now, the only way to mitigate an object that's seen in like less than 6 months out or a year out is nuclear disruption. Now, nuclear disruption can be a dual-edged sword. Nuclear disruption means you go in and you try to obliterate the comet or asteroid and send it into as many little pieces as possible. But then that poses a problem. Are those pieces going to hit the planet? Do they decide to do this? Do they know the pieces are going to hit the planet? Do they know how small they'll break up into? Is that the best method?
It's
Now,
all a
there's only one
guess.
other method.
They don't know.
There's one other method. Now, this is coming right out of the Lawrence Livermore Laboratory, and top uh, people that are part of this deflection program. There's only one other way to mitigate this kind of asteroid that's coming, if they were attempting to mitigate this because they think it's going to strike, is to brace for impact. That's their second option.
Come on now.
So their first option is nuclear disruption. Their second option is brace for impact. There's only two ways to mitigate this asteroid that's coming right now. If they think that it's, they may know it's going to miss and they may not do anything. I'm just saying they've activated the Stafford Act. All of this stuff is active. You got Pompeo saying we are in a live exercise. You've got militarization of the entire planet. You've got tanks and everything rolled out everywhere and basically put into position and ready to go. You've basically got 1 million reservists in the U.S. That are mostly medical field surgeons, stuff like this. You've basically got field hospitals and triage units set up all over the United States and world. You've basically got the government's hoarding dust masks telling their citizens that the citizens don't even need them. It doesn't matter if they tell you you need them, you can't even get them. They already have them. Okay, you got hospitals that are empty all over the entire world. Okay, what are they ready for? Now, let's just say this asteroid safely passes, but there could be many more, because let's speculate that Planet X really is moving in. We're seeing a lot of weather changes, a lot of earth changes, there's a lot of earthquakes. Yellowstone's ramping up. I told you guys before, the US government has contracts worth tens of billions of dollars with Argentina, Brazil, and several other countries. Africa turned this contract down. The African National Congress, they turned this contract down. They didn't want it. It's to house displaced citizens in case of the event of a Yellowstone supervolcano blows up. Now, of course, the Yellowstone supervolcano could blow up on its own, and it's due to blow up. But how do they know this thing's going to blow up? Why would they spend tens of billions of dollars a year with each one of these countries to house displaced citizens from the period of 2014 to 2024, a 10-year period? It's a 10-year window. Why? Why do they just now? Keep in mind, NASA has a plan to mitigate the Yellowstone supervolcano. Why is NASA trying to mitigate the supervolcano? Why is a space agency trying to mitigate a supervolcano? Why do they have plans to do that? So when this planet comes in, it activates volcanoes. Do they know this thing's moving in? I went and told you they raided the ancient text. They knew about it. They raided Zachariah Sitchin. They knew about it
Remind
from
us
their
who he
IRA.
is. Zachariah Sitchin. Who was he?
So he's an author who wrote many books on Nibiru. I think he wrote a book called The 10th Planet. I can't remember all the names of his books. So if you look up Zachariah Sitchin, and you type author Planet X or something like that, he'll probably pop up. I can't remember all the titles to his books, but
Here's his
basically,
website.
yeah. So this guy has been doing this for a while, and he's translated these old cylinder sills and whatnot. So he's one of the foremost researchers on it. I also consider Dr. Jason Rand a top expert on this, and many others that I've interviewed and that I will be interviewing. But the point is this thing can cause disruption. Okay, so all of this. Okay, so we see the White House deflection plan. Why asteroid deflection plans now? Do they know this object's moving in and it's just going to start pushing objects in from the asteroid belt?
People are saying this guy was a Freemason. It's interesting. I got to tell you, Shepard, the comments are everywhere, all over the board. From Shepard is 100% correct. And it's just running the gamut from Shepard is 100% correct to Shepard is out of his mind.
Right. Okay. So very well. That's good. Okay. So Zachariah Sitchin, a lot of people, some people say, oh, he's a shill. Oh, he's this. Okay. Who cares? There's a lot of good information. Maybe someone shilled out. Maybe the orbital pattern's not 3,600 years. Maybe it's 4,000. Maybe, we don't know all that. But what we do know is these texts exist. They were found in Sumeria. The Anunnaki Kings list goes back all these years. A lot of this stuff's been independently confirmed by many researchers. We know that in documented history, there's certain types of people that think if you talk about some guy, then you're a shill and all this. It's just not the case. People need to research and read as many things as they can, and then your brain, using the trivium and logic, should be able to form what's called a general consensus. And if you can form a general consensus, so you've got data points matching up. Okay, let's take COVID. Okay, I'm investigating COVID. Okay, I'm a legitimate COVID investigator, probably the most authored journalist literally in the entire world, provably with over 160, 170 reports on COVID. Okay, now I'm investigating it. I find out the people who control the COVID map, the Johns Hopkins University, are the same people that divert near-Earth objects with Project DART. Okay.
What?
Yes. So the people that control the COVID map, which they have the whole populace locked down based on this map and all these suggestions and these supposed cases, even though there's no one in these hospitals, this map has served as a good little map to lock the world's populace down. And it just so happens the very people that run this whole entire map deflect asteroids for NASA. Imagine that. Now that's what you call a data point. 2 data points, and they match up. Now, any investigator in the entire world will tell you if you have 3 data points that match up, it's pretty much a dinger, okay? Now, I probably have about 1,000 data points that match up on what I'm talking about right now. So my alarm bells are going off, and I can't tell anyone what's going to happen or what's happening. I'm not claiming any asteroid's going to hit. I'm not claiming Planet X is coming in. My alarm bells are going off, and I want to get to the bottom of it. I've now switched I've basically unless something big comes out on COVID, we know all these hospitals, I've basically switched my investigation now from COVID to I'm still investigating COVID through this because it could be part of the plan, but to I'm investigating all of a sudden near-Earth objects because it's all seems to be connected. What justifies I hear, okay, the Q guys, here's the Q guys. They're going around, they're arresting everyone. They're getting them out of underground tunnels. Okay, great.
Right.
So you're going to lock down the whole entire world, roll out militaries.
Doesn't make sense.
You're going to limit everyone's food supply. You're going to cull animals. You're going to tell farmers they have to sell their livestock. You're going to tell people they can't enter their vacation homes in Rhode Island. You're going to put checkpoints in Florida. You're going to do asymptomatic things. You're going to go detain some people. You're not going to detain some people. Some people are going to military bases. Some aren't. Some people are being herded like cattle in China. Some people are jumping off balconies committing suicide. All of that, does that seem likely? That's all because of a sting operation that they could have just
no, I think everybody agrees that something is weird about what's going on with the coronavirus lockdown. And I also think that, what you're saying is definitely intriguing. I want to ask you about something related to this, Shepard, because about a year ago, I did an interview with Brian Forrester. Brian is very well known for going around the world and investigating some of these ancient artifacts that are not explained. He's done a lot of work on these elongated skulls, and there have been scientists who are evaluating the the DNA of this stuff. And he's not a clown. He's a very smart guy. And as you've been talking about all these hieroglyphics or scrolls or whatever these are, it's well known that there's ancient sculptures that contain celestial bodies. I mean, before they had telescopes, before they had, they show flying devices and things that look like helicopters and stuff, also pretty unexplained.
So even Brian Forrester, if you had him on the show right now, I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but I'm sure he would tell you right now, and I know he would, that there's parallel civilizations, because I've seen him on video talking about how he sees Inca place the stone, and everyone thinks that, the Inca did this and the Inca did that. But meanwhile, they've rebuilt over megalithic structures that humans couldn't have even have created, essentially.
He talks
Okay.
about that type of stuff all the time.
So just more knowledge and information. Okay, here's something. Who built the pyramids? There's not one guy that can build a pyramid to this day, period. Not even a small one. Imagine building a big one. Why haven't they done it? Why can't one guy build a pyramid? They can't. They can't even lift these blocks with cranes we have. It's just, they didn't lift them with sticks. They're not doing it. There wasn't 10,000 slaves. You could go get 10,000 slaves to lift a block and they could try it all day long. It's just not happening. So the point is there's more out there than they've told you. Okay. Now, coincidentally, on November 9th of 1983, NASA reported that the IRAS telescope discovered a new object, possibly a dark asteroid, a dead comet. This raised an alarm bell, and it prompted the birth of Rex 84. For anyone who doesn't know what Rex 84 is, Rex 84 stands for Readiness Exercise 1984. And it was and still is a classified drill and scenario that may be used to detain large numbers of U.S. citizens who have been deemed to be, quote, security threats in the event that the president declares a national emergency.
Sounds
For
like
the
you and
first
me.
time in history. Yeah, exactly. They have what's called the red list and the blue list. People can check it out later. But
Wow.
in a national emergency, that's what we're in right now. All 50 states for the first time are in an emergency. Now, basically, this reporter with the Miami Herald reported on July 5th in 1987. He exposed all this, and he exposed how basically it forced the U.S. government to address its plan for the mass internment of Americans in the event of an impending disaster to combat what the government claimed may be subversive activities. In short, government scientists, astronomers, and officials knew that an object, possibly a massive dark asteroid, failed comet, or failed brown dwarf star, was headed inbound into our solar system and was posing a threat to our planet. This is all, if you research Oliver North, the Iran-Contra hearings in 1987, it's where Congressman Jack Brooks says, Colonel North, in your work at the NSC, were you assigned at one time to work on plans for the continuity of government in the event of a major disaster? And he goes, Norris counsel replies, Mr. Chairman, question mark, like you shouldn't be talking about that. Senator Daniel replies, I believe that question touches upon a highly sensitive classified area, so may I request you not touch upon that. Brooks says, I was particularly concerned, Mr. Chairman, because I read in Miami papers and several others that there had been a plan developed by the same agency and contingency plan in the event of emergency that would suspend the American Constitution. And I was deeply concerned about it and wondered that was in an area in which he had worked. They're talking about Oliver North. I believe it was, and I wanted to get this confirmation. Now this guy Inui, I don't know how to pronounce that. I don't know who that is necessarily. May I most respectfully request that this matter not be touched upon at this stage. If we wish to get into this, I'm sure certain arrangements can be made for an executive session. So contingency plans by the U.S. government for rounding up people perceived by the government to be subversive or a threat to civil order have existed for many decades. For example, from 1967 to 71, the FBI kept a list of over 100 people. So it goes on to talk about that. The videos in this article, people can watch Oliver North and all that, them down there. Okay, so the birth of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. So with the government's classified knowledge
Shep,
of the
would you like
existence,
to listen
yes,
to it for just a moment?
yes,
Touches
yes.
upon a highly sensitive and classified area. So may I request that you not touch upon that, sir?
I was particularly concerned, Mr. Chairman, because I read in Miami papers and several others that there had been a plan developed by that same agency, a contingency plan in the event of emergency that would suspend the American Constitution, and I was deeply concerned about it.
There you go.
So they've had a plan that can suspend the American Constitution. Now, this
Seems like
plan,
we're in that right now, Shepard.
we are actually. So the thing is like I thought okay, so I'm a Planet X researcher and have been since I was 12 years old. But the point is that I thought that they would maybe do this in like a total New World Order takeover, which also appears to be like what they're doing as well. But and I also had an independent thought that they would do this like if the planet was moving in. Okay, so there's two trains of thought there. Now, basically, the Federal Emergency Management Agency is an agency of the United States Department of Homeland Security, initially created by Presidential Reorganization Plan number 3 of 1978. This is out of Wikipedia.
Jimmy Carter.
And implemented by 2 executive orders on April 1st of 1979. So they kind of pre-implemented this, possibly as if they knew this planet was moving in, because in 79, think if they put the IRS telescope, they had to build it. They knew something was up. Then because it was tugging on the planets, they could see it with other things, but they couldn't see it in infrared. Then by 82, 83, they put the IRAS up and they could see this. So in this, there's Executive Order 11921 was an executive order, this is out of Wikipedia, approved by the President of the United States, Gerald Ford, on June 11, 1976. It amends Executive Order 11490 of October 28, 1969, which calls for the federal agencies to prepare plans for the state of emergency that would require overall civilian manpower mobilization programs and related to emergency measures. Now, doesn't mobilization programs? Okay. FEMA has more power than the President of the United States and the Congress, and has often been referred to as the secret government. So that was me saying that part. Now, in this article, I go on and I write a report authored in 1995 by Harry V. Martin with the research assistance from David Call, titled FEMA, the Secret Government, reveals the true power of the agency. The report makes clear that FEMA is not an elected body and does not involve itself in public disclosures, and it even has a quasi-secret budget in the billions of dollars, and this is back then. Documents on how this government organization has more power than the President of the United States or Congress. It has the power to suspend laws, move entire populations, arrest and detain citizens without warrant, and hold them without trial. It can seize property, food, supplies, transportation systems, and can suspend the Constitution, which sounds a lot like what's going on now. The report goes on to point out how not only FEMA is the most powerful entity in the United States, but was not even created under constitutional law by Congress. It was essentially a product of executive order. So FEMA was basically almost illegally created. Congress was like circumvented. So FEMA, under Executive Order 10990, it allows the government to take over all modes of transportation and control of highways and seaports. Executive Order 10995 allows the government to seize and control the communication media. So if we're really in this, Jason, expect a knock at our door anytime soon.
Yeah. Let's just turn off the live stream, I think.
Executive Order 10997 allows the government to take over all electrical, power, gas, petroleum, fuels, and minerals. Executive Order 10998 allows the government to take over all food resources and farms. Executive Order 11,000 allows the government to mobilize civilians into work brigades under government supervision. Oh, great. Executive Order 11001 allows the government to take overall health, education, and welfare functions, which basically they've done. Executive Order 11002 designates the Postmaster General to operate a national registration of all persons. I'm sure they already have that. Executive Order 11003 allows.
Shepard, you just froze. We just lost you. Hang on now. I think we've lost Shepard here. Oh, interesting. Okay, let me see if we can get Shepard back there real quick. That's unfortunate. We're gonna have to do it like this. Stand by, everybody. So the guest right now is Shepard Ambellas of IntelliHub.com. Shepard is telling us all about research into the 10th planet that's been speculated about and looked into for many, many years by a variety of astronomers, by NASA, by all kinds of people. And we've got a lot of viewers right now who are doubting what Shepard is saying, and I would say an equal or greater number of viewers who are very intrigued by what Shepard is saying. We're going to get him back in just a minute here. We've got some technical issues that there seems to be no shortage of. It's always interesting that we can sometimes have shows for 2 and 3 hours with no problem, and then sometimes we have shows that fail right away. Let me just tell him, stand by, bringing you back. Let's see what we've got for comments here. So, just looking at what people are saying, Space Force is another branch of the military, raises a red flag. Well, that's interesting, Robbie. Certainly it shows a focus by President Trump's administration on this kind of stuff. Homeland Security. Yeah, we're getting Shepard back here. Well, maybe the problem was at his end. He's not responding to the text initially, but let's see if we can bring him back in here. People are very concerned about what's going on with FEMA, rightfully so. Let's see if we can get Shepard back. Shepard, you back? There we go.
Yeah.
All right, sorry about that. We lost
How
you.
long ago did I drop out?
I would say 2 minutes ago.
Let me cover this one executive order. This is real important. So this is near the bottom of the list. Executive Order 11921 allows the Federal Emergency Preparedness Agency to develop plans to establish control over the mechanisms of production and distribution, which they've already done. They've already forced people to start producing masks.
You're talking about that Emergency Production Act or whatever it is that Trump has been talking about quite a bit.
Right. Now, it also says of energy sources, wages, salaries, credit, and the flow of money in U.S. financial institution and in any undefined national emergency. Now get this. This is breaking on your show right now. It also provides that when a state of emergency is declared by the president, Congress cannot review the action for 6 months. So now, the Federal Emergency Management Agency has broad powers in every aspect of the nation, okay? This is still coming out of that report, FEMA, the secret government. This is what they wrote. And General Frank Salazito, chief of FEMA's Civil Security Division, this is back in the day, in 1983, stated in a conference that he saw FEMA's role as a new frontier in the production of individual and governmental leaders from assassination and of civil and military installations, from sabotage and or attack, as well as prevention of dissident groups from gaining access to U.S. opinion or a global audience in time of crisis. So, Jason, we have a global audience. Now, these powers were transferred to FEMA in a sweeping consolidation, okay? Now, the Black Vault report. Ronald Reagan's own handwriting emphasizes importance of alien threat, reference in UN speech 1987. So as reported by TV producer John Greenwald in 2018, one of the first programs I produced for television was entitled UFO Files, UFOs in the White House, which aired on the History Channel. I was also an associate producer on the show, and I had the pleasure of visiting the Ronald Reagan Library to take a look at his presidential records for use in the program. While researching the speech he gave to the United Nations, he referenced, quote, an alien threat. This is Ronald Reagan that said that. I made an interesting, now, an alien threat, Ronald Reagan, the IRAS telescope back in the day. They knew this planet was inbound. Okay. I made an interesting discovery in his own handwriting, making sure what he called his fantasy stayed in the speech. This is a very interesting piece of UFO history. So there's the speech notes in here. You know, he's talking about alien. Now, with this COVID-19 emergency declaration, see, this is what I'm telling you guys. I'm researching COVID, the Johns Hopkins map. They control near-Earth objects. They control the trajectory of near-Earth objects. They can impact them. They can blow them. Anything they want to do, they can blow them up. COVID-19, once COVID-19...
But don't we, sorry to interrupt, Shepard, but don't we have no idea if they can or cannot blow them up? These things could be denser than anything on Earth. They could launch a nuclear missile at it. It could bounce off.
Sure, yeah. I mean, everything, possibly what Pompeo may even be referring to is a live exercise. Maybe they've never really even attempted it, you know. So basically, through the activation of COVID, the emergency declaration, this empowered FEMA tremendously, okay? This Stafford Act also activated the Near-Earth Object Mitigation Plan. I'm not making this up. It's right in their plan. So that Stafford Act had to be activated for the Near-Earth Object Mitigation to happen. Whatever they're going to attempt to mitigate, whether it's this next asteroid or 5 after it or 400 after that, I don't know. I don't know if any of these things are going to hit. I just know they activated it all. Why would they activate it? I don't know. Is this planet moving in? So in a White House press briefing on March 13th, President Donald Trump said, quote, this is a quote, okay, this is on March 13th, just now recently, okay? This is only the beginning of what we are really doing. And now we're in a different phase. This is what Donald Trump said. We had some very old and obsolete rules, and then I write in parentheses, the U.S. Constitution, that we had to live with that worked under certain circumstances, but not under mass circumstances. Now, remember, I just laid out in the executive order how they can suspend the Constitution through FEMA, okay, by activating FEMA and empowering a national emergency. Then the president goes on to say, just recently, on March 13th, they were there for a long time. He's talking about these old and obsolete rules. They were in place for a long time, and we're breaking them down now. And they are very useful for certain instances, but not for this. To unleash the full power of the federal government of this effort today, I am officially declaring a national emergency. Ladies and gentlemen, with that statement, the president has handed over full control of the U.S. government to FEMA and is now completely powerless.
So a lot of people are talking about Trump's press conferences that are happening sometimes, or perhaps all the time. I haven't evaluated this closely
and
enough.
The seal is missing off the podium,
right?
And it says White House. Okay, I haven't confirmed anything about this, and it keeps being replaced, and it keeps not being replaced. One of my thoughts on this is maybe they're in an underground base setting, and one podium's there, and one podium says the White House because they're actually in the White House. Maybe the other podium's in a bunker.
That, because if we don't know where they are.
Yeah, I mean, they could just have another podium. We don't know,
but that's where my thought goes initially, is that everything is very hectic. They have a reduced staff because people are sent home because of this pandemic, and they just don't have it there.
I wouldn't jump to too much about that, but it is weird because people are noticing at the same time the different podiums are switching. Guess what else is switching? Does anyone know? Can anyone tell me? So the yellow fringe on the flag, maritime law versus de jure law. So this is a problem, okay? Now,
We've got commenters telling us that the seal is back. The seal was there today, Cage Lady tells us.
We need to also pay attention to this, and people need to analyze it. I don't have all the time for it. When is the yellow fringe coming back on the flag, and when is it not there? Is it there during the presidential seal, or is it there during the White House seal? This is actually an important detail. It's maritime law versus de jure law. Okay? We are either in maritime law when that flag's there, or de jure law when it's
What is
not.
de jure law?
It's hard to explain, but
well, then let's leave that for another. People can look
it's
that
a whole
up.
other
But we got a
deal.
lot to
Okay.
unpack here, and we're close to the end of our hour here, Shepard. I know
Okay,
you've got a
let me ram
podcast to
through this.
get to. Yeah.
I'm gonna ramrod it. Okay, so basically, the military has all these top secret plans. So this is in March 18th, a report out of Newsweek. This is just recently, March 18th, a report out of Newsweek titled "Exclusive: Inside the Military's Top Secret Plans If the Coronavirus Cripples the Government." Now, this confirms General O'Shaughnessy's authority. Okay, so General O'Shaughnessy is the guy who's locked down with a whole team independent of Trump in NORAD right now in Northcom, and they've got all their people in the underground base and they're sealed in, and he can act independently and carry out military action right now from the president. Why would they do that if it's just a virus? I mean, look, why would they lock him down in there? One of my thoughts that came to my head instantly was, if they're going to test the president every day or every week or whatever, wouldn't they know he had the virus? So then why wouldn't the mountain go into lockdown if he got the virus? So they're pre-locking people in. Okay, people could say, well, they're pre-locking them down so the virus can't get into the mountain. Okay, great. Now, this is out of the Newsweek. According to the new documents and interviews with military experts, the various plans, codenamed Octagon, Freejack, and Zodiac, are the underground laws to ensure government continuity. Now, we are already in continuity of government. I've proven this. And there's an article I did. If you search DOD in the search box on IntelliHub, it might pop up. But several months ago, it said something like the DOD, I can't remember the title, but basically the DOD had activated a bunch of stuff several months ago, which right there, what's that say? Plan to respond and mitigate to biological threats. So in the name of biological threats, essentially continuity of government was activated, okay? No one really came out and said this. I just know too much about it. That's what happened. Now, okay, basically they have these secret plans. Now, this we're in territory we've never been in before, this article's saying, and this is a recent article in March. And it basically talks about how there's all these different plans. Now, Con Plan 3400, it says, or the military's plan for homeland defense, if America itself is a battlefield, that will be activated. Now, America itself is a battlefield. It's already been termed that. President Bush already deemed it a battlefield, and we've actually been in Con Plan 3400 the whole entire time.
President Bush deemed it?
I believe so.
When was that?
So back during his presidency. So I believe so. I've forgotten more than I know, but basically, President Bush, if I remember right, deemed America a battlefield through executive orders, which essentially left this Con Plan 3400 open, which means America was always a battlefield, okay? So Con Plan 3500, defense and support of civil authorities, where the military assists in an emergency short of an armed attack on the nation. So if it's short of an armed attack, the military will assist in 3500, not just the National Guard. Con Plan 3600, military operations in the national capital region and continuation of government, under which the most secret plans to support continuity are nested. That's in Con Plan 3600. You can see this. All of these plans are the responsibility of U.S. Northern Command, or NORTHCOM, and the Homeland Defense Military Authority created after 9/11. This is the Air Force General O'Shaughnessy is Northcom's Colorado Springs base commander, so he's locked down in there. He has authority right now to act independently of the president and can act on his own accord, whether the president tells him to or not. President Donald Trump's March 13th initiation of the Stafford Act activates presidential level near-Earth object preparedness strategy. That's in this article. We talked about that activated, okay? The whole mitigation plan's in here. And once you go past that, it talks about this asteroid that's approaching on the 29th, and it also we're in the variable trough for several weeks after. So we can literally be struck for several weeks after. So when we're not struck on April 29th, don't just take that as the end of the story with this one asteroid. It can still hit us after that for several weeks. Okay. The way it's working with its orbital path, I could show you the data here. Basically, if you go down where this asteroid is, you'll see little gray crosshairs.
Where do I get that story?
If you kind of scroll down in the article, that just keep going down in that article you're in right there, or not biological threats, the other article that has the most recent one I did with Doomsday Plan. And you go in Doomsday Plan activated, the real reason FEMA is in control of and POTUS is now powerless. So if you scroll down in that and you start scrolling down past the charts and that mitigation plan, the next thing you'll come up with is close approach on April 29th. Now, you'll see a black image in there of an orbital pattern. It's down a little more, more, quite a ways.
It's a big article.
It's a book. Yeah, I wrote that before breakfast the other day. It would go down right there. Okay, what's that say? Asteroid orbital elements. Yeah, go to that black picture.
For some reason, there we go.
Right there. Okay, now I don't know if the audience can see this. On the gray, okay, so the Earth is the blue ring, and the gray line is their best guess of how the asteroid is going to orbit. Now, you see those little cross hatches, Jason?
Yeah, that's sort of the plus or minus. They go up and down.
That's the plus or minus. That's the trough that this thing is in. Okay, now that's the variable data. Now, if you go down more and more. It talks about how the COVID maps controlled by the Johns Hopkins Institute and how they also control near-Earth objects, and they're part of NASA's deflection program.
Now, this was just the other day. You've got this tweet from someone saying apparently a meteorite the size of a fist impacted Earth in Nigeria yesterday at 53,000 miles per hour, and it left a large crater. But we really haven't heard too much about this. We can see
they're
people
keeping things quiet. Yeah, and so there was another object that came down. People think it's a meteor in Iceland yesterday or the day before, and I have an image of it. It's on my Twitter. There's several images. I haven't got any real news out of Iceland, and I don't know if it hit or airburst or what it even was, but it honestly looks like a meteor. So I don't know. I tweeted it out just in case it's relevant. People can check my Twitter. I'm not claiming it's real or whatever, but it looked like it. So President Trump cryptically admits he is no longer president of the United States after empowering FEMA due to COVID-19 national emergency declaration. So President Donald Trump cryptically admitted during an April 10th White House press briefing just recently that he is no longer the president of the American people. Now, this is a quote right out of his mouth. You guys can watch the video. He says, quote, "The American people have been so disciplined. It has been my honor to be their president," he said. Then he goes on to say, "It has been my great honor to have been," past tense, "their president. I have a big decision coming up, and I only hope to God it's the right decision. But it will be based on the input of a lot of very talented people, very smart people, and people that love our country." And then he's basically like, "Thank you very much," and just walks away. Now, he's talking about how he was the president, past tense, okay? Now, slip of the tongue or not? I don't know. That's what he said. It looks like he handed this power over. I could see it in his face. It looks like he told Pompeo, "You should have told me. You should have told me."
People are talking about that in the comments where
like
Pompeo says we're in a live exercise.
Right, or the planet's moving in. "You should have told me. You should have." Okay, so we don't know, but that's what he said. Okay.
Mother of Three says, "Good thing I bought the asteroid rider on my homeowner's insurance."
So check this out. So next thing I got is Mike Pompeo in here admitting we're in a live exercise. So that's in there. People can check that out. Then the next part of this is like, anyone that doesn't know anything about Planet X, they can read this. It's called Planet X for Dummies. I included it. It was an article I did before. I just dropped it in here. And it basically tells all the information, and it has interviews I did with top PhDs on Planet X. Okay, so these are interviews from 2010. Okay, if they missed the date of its passing, that's not like you got to debunk that. Oh, they did. This guy said it would probably come. No, there's no way you can track this unless you're the
Yeah.
government with a space-based telescope. So
Well, there's a
even
margin
if
for
that-
error.
yeah, if this guy got it right, let's say it's moving in right now and we start finding this out. I mean, that would be impressive. I mean, even a 50-year span or something would be impressive to me. So this basically gives the whole history of this. Okay, so it's in here. Now, a very important thing in this article, it talks about, moreover, in 2011, secretive and coded military drills were run in preparation for what's coming. In fact, the Elenin, if people remember this, the comet Elenin, the Elenin was a military code. The Elenin drill involved testing a massive worldwide network that would connect and go live in real time in the event of a major worldly disaster were to take place. To boot, agencies such as NASA have already prepped their on and off-world personnel for such an event. Now, there's a video in here with coming right from NASA talking about their off-world population and how they're preparing them. Okay.
Now wait a minute.
So they
what
have-
off-world population?
So
This is
NASA
not the
openly
children
admits-
on Mars that Robert David
It could
Steele
be.
was talking about.
It might be. NASA
Come on
openly
now.
admits. No,
No,
it's
they
right out of-
denied it.
It's right out of his mouth. Click that video and play it
This one here?
right there. Yeah, right out of NASA, the director of NASA's mouth.
He says they have off-world colonies that have
Yeah.
people on there.
He
All right,
says
let's see what
off-world
this guy says.
population.
They've given me a few minutes just to talk to all of you in our NASA family about emergency preparedness. NASA recently participated in a FEMA exercise called Eagle Horizon that was a part of a continuity of operations and government exercise that we do annually. And I became aware of some things that concern me about our family preparedness, and I wanted to talk to you very briefly. You know, we in NASA, we're an incredibly unique organization. We're the only agency in the federal government that's responsible for the safety and well-being of people, not only here on Earth, but off this planet. So my experience in the astronaut office,
I think
my
he's
experience as
talking
an
about
active duty Marine,
the International Space Station and
He
people
could
going
be.
into space.
He could be, but check this out. He's responsible for the safety of them on the planet and off the planet.
Yeah, because the second
They're
you
talking
step
about
onto
a
the
disaster.
International Space Station, you're
Right,
off the planet.
you're off the planet. Now, interestingly enough, though, he's talking about a disaster. He's talking about
But
FEMA.
let's just
and
clearly state that he's not talking about children being sent to Mars on
No,
a 20-year-old,
no.
20-year-long trip.
No, but-
It takes
but
5
that
to
could be-
7 months to get to Mars.
that could be interpreted anyway, but the bottom line is, okay, there's people on space stations. Why are they worried about them? Why are they drilling for FEMA talking about preparedness? Why are they responsible for on and off-world population? Okay, so they're drilling with FEMA like they're worried something's going to hit their space station. Okay, all right, it's weird.
We got a lot of
So-
anti-NASA comments here. People say
Yeah.
they're experts at CGI, R&D.
Well, they are. I mean, that's not. It's really. It's. They don't. I mean, show me a picture. They don't. They CGI everything. It's like known. Okay, so they have low Earth orbit. I've got tons of video of astronauts actually openly admitting that they can't go beyond low Earth orbit because there's the Van Allen radiation belt. No one's ever passed through it. Okay, so I don't know how they went to the moon and how they did all that, or if they passed through that, but astronauts that work for NASA literally are saying, like on video, that they can only go to low Earth orbit and they can't even traverse the Van Allen radiation.
I've seen that.
belt.
I don't
So
want to get into the moon landing being
Right.
fake and the flat
No,
Earth
no, no, no.
stuff and all that.
No,
Let's
but
for
it-
now, on the basis that the president and the military and all of those guys take NASA research into consideration in what they
Yeah.
do. Let's consider it authentic from that standpoint, and we'll evaluate. I think what you're saying
at
about
least-
these continuity of government plans and things, this is all very interesting.
Yeah,
I think
so
what
you
we
see
need
the
to do,
NASA guy
Shep,
talking
though.
about FEMA, Jason. Though you saw that NASA guy
Yeah.
talking about FEMA, though, right? Okay, so that's very interesting. Okay, so let me just go through this real quick and see if there's anything. So why hide this information from the public? Typically, you can't press release this stuff out to the public because if you did, society would collapse, said Lucas the founder of the website rabbithole2.com, who was on an interview with me and Dr. Rand at the time back in 2010, who was sitting shotgun during the bombshell 2010 broadcast with Shepard Ambellas and Dr. Jason Rand. Okay, society simply could not take this information being released on CNN and all of the other mainstream networks at once. It would be too chaotic and pandemonium would ensue. In fact, the real reason that Ronald Reagan's Readiness Exercise 84 was designed was not for a mass exodus of illegal aliens as the official plan stated back then. Now, if you go on Wikipedia, it literally says the plans to detain American citizens, just straight up, it just admits it. So this is the reason that there's over 700 FEMA camps and secret detention facilities that have been erected. This is what I'm writing in here across the U.S. and possibly could be the reason for the entire continuity of government COG program altogether, basically. So it goes into my appearance on America Declassified on the Travel Channel when I investigated the underground base, and it goes into how I found out through my investigation of the Denver Underground Airport when I was there with the Travel Channel, and I had access to pretty much everything except the exact door that I wanted to go in.
Really? What was that door? What do you suspect was behind it? And why did they not give you access to it?
Let me give you this exact door number, if I can, if I have it in here. Okay, ready for this? That's going to cause a shitstorm. If you work at the Denver airport and you can sneak down into
we're not encouraging anybody to sneak or do anything they're not supposed to do. Just tell me what door it is that you're looking for.
Ready? All right. BE64B. Okay. If anyone can see what's in that room, just let me know. All right. So when I got
what do you suspect is in that room?
That is the liaison entrance to the underground base. It's an intermediary entrance, and I basically confirmed this when the head liaison of the airport started yelling at me over this. So that really
yelling
happened.
at you over that.
Yeah. So she basically said, if you're so smart, what door is it in? And I'll go down there myself. And I gave her the exact door number, and she goes, "Who gave you that information? Who told you that?" So it was really weird. Now, this came from the New World Airport Commission. I basically got in a fight with them. So
New World Airport Commission? What is that?
So the New World Airport Commission controls Denver Airport, which is an aerotropolis. Okay. Now it's essentially an underground city. People can check it out.
Wow.
It's real.
Well, Shepard, there's so much for us to cover. Rather than just doing these marathon 3-hour shows, I think we've got a lot for people to digest right now. And I know you've got this podcast to do. So maybe we've covered this for right now. I think people are obviously going to take it into consideration. And, if a comet hits, I don't know that there's too much that we could really do, but it's an interesting theory.
Keep in mind, a lot of people's mind diverts to right away, like we're all going to die if a comet or a meteor hits. But keep in mind, things can fragment and they might take out a city here and there. It wouldn't be the worst thing, but
well, what if it's just a rock that hits Nigeria, like what we saw?
Right, and they might have mitigated whatever else. We know they're literally have the plan to mitigate, and they activated the Stafford Act, which allows the mitigation. So what's going on? Look, bottom line. What justifies the military rollout worldwide? Does a virus justify tanks all over? What justifies a military rollout worldwide? We got to ask that question and keep asking that question until we find out. No one's saying this planet's coming around, except the history books, actually. But no, I'm not claiming this. I'm not claiming an asteroid's going to hit. I'm just saying there's inbound objects. They're barely noticing them in advance, and all signs are pointing to this planet moving, and it's not me saying this, it's astronomers and scientists. You can Google.
And that's
Planet
why I've
9.
had you back on the show here. It's not about, just putting out some theory that you've come up with. There is a lot of interesting information on websites that people in the mainstream should consider important information. I get it that people who are watching us right now don't believe what NASA says, but in the context of the government, NASA is the official agency that researches space. And if they say, hey, we need to build a titanium rod weapon or tungsten rod weapon or a satellite or whatever, the military and the government listen to NASA. So if there's stuff happening on the ground here in New York City and elsewhere that people can't explain, this is one potential explanation. And when you point to things like executive orders and documents on whitehouse.gov, I don't think that people can say that you're crazy, Shepard. You're just pointing to information.
And I'm not, and there's specific disclaimers on this article, and I've stated on air. So like, I'm not even going to play that game with any shill. I mean, it's pointless. But the bottom line, like at minimum, say this planet was moving in, at minimum, it can cause volcanoes to erupt. Will it cause the Yellowstone supervolcano to erupt? We know that there's an actual plans in place to house displaced U.S. citizens if the Yellowstone supervolcano blew up, and there was a 10-year window, 2014 to 2024. Those contracts are active, 2014 to 2024. There's also the Deagle report. The Deagle report is basically a report that a lot of top business people get, a lot of Illuminati, a lot of New World Order, and it's literally proven to be really accurate. And it basically talks about how not only the world population is going to be drastically lower right now, but and then you could probably Google Deagle, basically search Deagle. Well, you probably know what to go to exactly, but it's talking about the U.S. population is going to be almost nothing here, and that gives this time frame. How did they know this? Okay.
It's interesting, Shepard. I have to say, yeah, it's a lot of stuff for people to look at. And I mean, like I said, you know, the thing that really intrigued me was, you know, when you say Planet X is coming back, my immediate thought is, what the hell are you talking about? But when you say the 10th planet was discovered by this respected astronomer who dubbed it Planet 10 with the numeral X, and that it's on orbit.
Very important.
Hang on, let me just finish this thought.
Yeah.
Because when you say a planet is coming back, that sounds crazy. When you say that this planet is on a 5,000-year orbit, and for the first time in 5,000 years, it's coming to a point where it would be,
orbit,
or whatever it is, thousands of years orbit. That makes sense to the people who believe that space exists and the planets are in orbit. For people who don't, then, you know, anything could happen at any moment.
Now, I want to make something else clear. They downgraded Pluto from being a planet. Now, my personal opinion on this is, why did they downgrade Pluto from being a planet?
Yeah, it seemed weird. Who cares?
They also, scientists and astronomers named that new incoming planet that they discovered, because they downgraded Pluto, they named it Planet 9.
Right.
Why is this important? Because that would block all search terms of people searching for the new Planet 9 and relating it to Planet X or 10, okay? Just a thought and an observation.
IFFW team says Planet X is a hoax. I mean, it's not a hoax as far as I know. There's information written about it, and we're talking about that information today.
It's literally documented in every single civilization across planet Earth in their ancient texts, including basically the Bible. Okay, so you guys just got to go check into this. The Bible doesn't come out and say Planet X is there, but there's things like wormwood. There's things that all connect.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a controversial topic, Shepard, but it is interesting and I think entertaining and informative to research. Once again, people who are just joining us, they can visit Shepard's website. He's there at intellihub.com, and people who appreciate Shepard's information and find this informative, entertaining, comical, for whatever reason, even if you're here in the comments saying negative things about Shepard, if you're spending your time watching this, you're obviously engaged by it, and you should support Shepard by going to intellihub.com/contact/donate, and you can use PayPal to support Shepard's reporting there at intellihub.com. People, of course, can support Crowdsource the Truth. By becoming a sponsor, sponsors gain access to a huge and growing library of sponsor-exclusive content. You can get that on subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Even if you're just enjoying the free content here on YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, it's very important that you become a sponsor. I can't keep bringing you these shows without your sponsorship. And Shepard, great to have you back on the show. We're going to be talking
Anytime.
about this some more, and I appreciate you bringing this information forward. People are just going to have to keep paying attention.
One quick thing, if according to history and what researchers have told me when I've interviewed them, if the planet's moving in, there's a destructive cycle that's about a 27-month cycle. That means about 13 and a half months inbound, and as it exits outbound, and this planet system comes in retrograde to our system, which is a problem.
What does that mean?
It comes in, it enters at exactly the opposite rotation of our system. So if our planets are rotating like this, it's coming in at a highly elliptical orbit, but it's literally kind of going the other way. Okay.
Huh.
So there's hundreds of links in this article. Everyone should click them. I had one troll, obviously a shill, tell me the other day, but you didn't provide any information in this article. Okay, whatever.
What?
It's like half of a book.
It's a pretty dense article for sure. People can read that article over on IntelliHub.com, and I do encourage people to check it out. IntelliHub.com is Shepard's website. Great source for information. And listen, no one knows the details of what's going on, no one in the public. So
Right.
I think it's fair to entertain Shepard's hypothesis and look at his information critically. And I appreciate you coming on the show, Shepard. I'm interested in
Anytime.
what you're telling us about, and I think that you've done a lot of good research. And again, when people take the time to kind of unpack what you're saying and look at it with a very critical eye, it makes a lot more sense than what you might initially have thought. And it certainly gave us an opportunity to create this cool and retro space graphic.
It's where my COVID investigation has led me. So I'm investigating COVID. It led me to this. Now I'm trying to get to the bottom line is what justifies this military deployment on such a massive scale worldwide. Thanks, Jason. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Shepard. Great to have you, and appreciate everybody tuning in and watching. Have a great evening, everybody. See you soon.